Welcome, everybody, to the Catholic Professionals Podcast. My name is Andrew Jacoby, and I am blessed to be joined today by Joseph DiPaolo. Joseph is a young Catholic adult living in Nashville and working as a data analyst at the Farm Bureau Insurance Company. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Andrew. It's great to speak to another Philadelphian.
Yeah, right. Amen. Even though, that's right. You grew up in Florida. We could get into your story, but you're a Philadelphian in at heart by family.
Yeah, by
So,
sport. Yeah.
by sport, which is heart. So, the Eagles are not looking that bad. 4-2. We started out bad. We got, okay. We're not beating the greatest teams in the world, but we're doing okay. So anyway, I'll take 4-2. We've definitely had years where it's worse than that.
Yeah.
We'll start off with the sponsorship, and then we'll get a little bit of we'll hear a little bit about your history in the faith and how you're managing it with work, and what it's like to be a young Catholic guy working for a bigger company out there, and what that's all about. So I'll start off. We're sponsored today by my company, GoodShepherdStaffing.com, where we are helping Catholics in developing countries find work that enables them to make a local living wage as well as work from home near their families, because a lot of people in developing countries, if they live in smaller towns, have to leave those smaller towns to go to big cities or leave the country in order to make a living, which hurts their ability to both form and maintain family relationships. So we'd like for them to make a living and also be able to do so from home so that they can be with their kids and family. If you've never worked with a remote virtual assistant, we're happy to give you 10 hours of free trial. So we will pay the person to work for you for 10 hours so you can see what it's like, see what kind of tasks they can do, what it's like to interact with them. And then if you want to move forward, it's around $5 an hour, more or less, for an entry-level assistant. And then the prices will go up based upon experience level. And we can place different people with different skill sets. If you need a programmer or what have you, we can place that as well. Pricing will be varied there. So if that sounds of interest to you, please do go to GoodShepherdStaffing.com and reach out. Happy to talk to you. Okay, sponsorship over. So Joseph, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some history about yourself, your faith journey, how you manage it with work, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be more happy to share my testimony if the interview goes there. But I grew up in Orlando area, born and raised. I was a cradle Catholic and went to school, University of Florida. And at that time, I was really, really involved in politics. And that's where I thought my life was going to go. That's why when I saw that you studied political science, I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to like this guy, especially because you're in the swingiest of swing states this election as well. So when I got done with that, I knew I wanted to do some kind of service work. I didn't know if it was going to continue to be on campaigns, if I wanted to do military service. I was even interviewing with the Franciscans to do missionary service down in Bolivia. Ultimately, I became a focus missionary, did that for a couple of years. That's what brought me here to Nashville, Tennessee, and have since stayed just because I've loved it here. So that's all in all, my journey. If we can talk more about the faith stuff, we can talk more about how I arrived at it. It's really up to you.
Sure. Well, yeah, curious, what was it like to be a focus missionary? What does a focus missionary do? We all have heard about focus missionaries, but what is the focus missionary program?
I would say focused missionaries were almost like super college students who don't have to go to class. But any of you who've been blessed to have been part of a campus ministry probably know those few students who were very actively involved. They might have been the person who invited you in. They set a good example to help lead others in the faith. And typically that's what focused missionaries are. We're like a foot in college, a foot in the real world. We are all recent graduates. We had to go through an interview process. We've had to do a lot of training, and we, in essence, give entirely of ourselves for at least 2 years, though some of us can stay on more. We even fundraise our salary, just with the purpose of trying to introduce Christ to people on campus. Sometimes it's the people who are coming around the Catholic community already. So you're already in the door and we want to take you up the elevator. For other people, it's you want to propose Christ to people who have simply never met him before. And that's the beautiful thing is it really, the nature of your mission is molded to the kind of campus that you're on. And there are so many other things that Focus does as well to try to help facilitate an encounter. Namely, they've got the Seek conference, which will have 15 to 20,000 people congregating every single year, almost like a Catholic Comic-Con, I guess, for college students. Though they've actually been expanded out to parishioners as well, which has been a great advancement. They do a lot of mission trips as well, which is something that is very near and dear to my heart. Not just because of the service work that you're doing, but the ability to bridge the gap between here and abroad, which of course is what your business is doing. So anyway, there's a lot of really beautiful things about that. And God willing, through our Bible studies, through our one-on-one discipleship, we have helped set an example that somebody might be able to use so that they are more aligned in terms of their faith, that they have stronger faith habits, and they're committed to trying to spend the rest of their life pursuing Him.
Do you have any anecdotes or experiences that you had at as a focus missionary that really impacted you, where you saw the Lord working in someone's life, or at least through your work as a missionary?
Yes. So many, it's actually going to be hard to pick one in particular. I was just routinely surprised just how much people don't have it together. I'll start by that because I was called to be a missionary at Vanderbilt, right? And a quick story about that even ties into my story is I had applied to Vanderbilt undergrad, got in and didn't go because of the economy. After 2 years, I applied to transfer to Vanderbilt and didn't go because I realized I couldn't run away from my problems. So of all 113 campuses Focus could have sent me to, they ended up sending me to the one place that I was meaning to go to, which is incredible, which was Vanderbilt. And so it was insane because how many times does the Lord give you an opportunity to revisit a path in your life that you didn't go down? It's bizarre to think that all of the people that I'm friends with now, I would have always been friends with, except had I done things on my own timing as opposed to the Lord's timing, I wouldn't have been as filled up with as much to give to them, which is beautiful, right? Because I would like to think at the end of the day, everything that we're doing as Catholics and as men is to leave people better off than we find them. And so a lot of the stories that I have that really stick to me were about leading with that vulnerability. Because as much as I had it going in to college, like I had it all together, it fell apart pretty quickly, not necessarily because of vice and sin, but maybe just because of me not doing as well in school and me not knowing what I wanted to do in my life. Vanderbilt is full of a bunch of people who got in precisely because they had it all together. Now you end up in a community of people who are all pushing for the same goals, and sometimes the wheels start to fall off, and you don't understand why. And it's crazy. What I see a lot of, Andrew, is a lot of Mona Lisas, a lot of people who they look like they're smiling until you get up close, and you realize they're not. And so me talking about things like, let's say, my own personal struggles and not knowing what I wanted to do in my life, particularly just heartfelt things that have happened, even, believe it or not, just dating. Like that blew my mind. And I can't give specific names in case they might be listening to this, but I, in one of the talks that I had given the students, talked about how I hadn't dated anybody before. And I actually wouldn't date anybody for another 5 years after that until my wife. And I don't recommend that as far as dating advice goes. But I shared how I wasn't dating anybody, and yet I still felt this incredible peace with Christ. And I thought I was the only person who dealt with that. And it was amazing to see how many people came up afterwards and had also felt the same way. I mean, people who were much stronger than me. One person was, on the football team. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, how do you guys have so much going for you, seemingly really desire a relationship and not have that? But turns out all of these stories are really beautiful ways to just try and get people to open up. And once they start opening up, I feel like you have the beautiful part of realigning them. One of the things that I would do all the time, actually, Andrew, and I'm sorry I'm rambling on a little bit here, is I would ask them, I said, what's the thing that's been most on your mind that people aren't asking you about? You get all kinds of responses that way, right? I'm thinking about that football guy, right? I was throwing the football with him in the alley, and I just sprung that on him. And he had told me before, he's like, hey, look, I only have like 40 minutes. Got a lot of stuff going on today. I've got homework and all of that. I said, okay, sure. We went on for like 2 or 3 hours. Like, I cannot tell you how many 3 to 4 hour lunches I've had. You just ask a guy a few questions. Nobody's asked. Nobody's really cared. And then you realize all of these things in their life that I'm like, why are you doing X, Y, or Z? All makes sense. You know, it just, they haven't shared it with anybody. And men particularly need fellowship. Like, that is so important if we're trying to run closer to Christ and opening ourselves up and stuff. Like, I think of, John Edwards and what he's doing with just a guy in the pew. And he was able to come to Nashville and share his story and all the stuff that he did to open up people through that. So I can't think of like one thing in particular as much as I can think of just constant examples over and over and over again of people who seemingly have it together but don't. You open them up a little bit, they realize, wow, I'm a mess. And then that's a perfect example of saying, well, let's bring you to the one person who can clean you up.
Amazing. I can't pass this up as a question because, so you've only dated your wife.
Yeah. Isn't that insane?
Well, it's not that common. So I'm curious, because you obviously met a lot of women in your life.
Sure.
Like you went to high school and you went to college and there are women there. So were you not dating on purpose, or were you saying like, I'm just going to wait, and like it wasn't on your mind, and then all of a sudden you met your wife and it was like just the angels started to sing? I mean, she must be kind of incredible, or there must have been some circumstance that made it such that the way it happened is the way it happened.
To be honest, I wouldn't recommend my approach to anybody, and I don't think it was coming out of a good spot. Like, growing up, everybody, especially parents, friends, all saw me as like the good Catholic kid because I went to church on Sundays, I got good grades, I wasn't having sex, doing drugs, even drinking, anything like that. So seemingly you had it all together. And I was pretty popular in high school too. In fact, I was on prom court and I didn't have a date to prom. And it's not because I was striking out, it's because I wouldn't even go up to bat. I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. Maybe it was like a hyper perfectionism or this need to maybe prove like my worth. I know certainly not being able to share it with people was a big part of it, because you might like a girl and then you get all excited and then you build it up in your mind to the point that she's not even real anymore. She just begins to embody a fake hope, something that doesn't exist, right? Then you finally go and you tell her, you like to ask her out or something. And then of course she's not interested, right? Because, you're treating this like a proposal when she doesn't even know you like that. It's ridiculous. So a lot of that happened. And I realized it was a problem, truthfully, my junior year of college, because I had come home and I had the idea. I'm like, I'm going to text one of my friends to ask him to hang out. And this is an insane thing to say, Andrew, but I promise to you, this is 100% accurate. And so I'm like sitting on like the stairwell at my house back in Orlando, and I just couldn't send the message because, believe it or not, I never in my life to that point, and here I am, that's 2013, so I'm 93, so that was like 20 years old, right? At no point in my life to that point had I ever actually asked somebody just to hang out with me. So I was talking about dating before, but even in terms of general friendship, I had never just said, hey, do you want to hang out with me? I had friends, but I always couched it in such a way. It's like, hey, I have this football game you want to join, or we're doing this debate after school. Do you want to go to this debate, right? Always something else, so that if you said no, you were saying no to that thing. You weren't saying no to me. And that fragile ego, insanely enough, was able to, just continue for years. I eventually enrolled in a self-help study at University of Florida about perfectionism. It's diagnosable as OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And it's interesting because everybody thinks that, it's like a biological thing like OCD, and it's not. It's it's psychological. And though the reasons why it manifests are not super well known right now, it's interesting because it stops being about like nice right angles and it starts becoming about mitigating risk, right? It's calculating everything in the world to try to mitigate risk so that you don't get hurt again.
Mm.
It's really like a vulnerability defense. So kind of funny, of all the careers to study, I choose statistics, right? Because that's literally what it is. It's quantifying everything. But it was not in a healthy way that would show you truth in places that maybe you're not normally seeing it, but rather in a means of just defending yourself and protecting yourself from being embarrassed of whatever. I mean, I played hockey growing up. Like led multiple clubs and stuff. It's not that I didn't have a social life. It's just I didn't feel like I had anything to give.
Hmm.
And it is insane, I think, particularly with Gen Z. I'm the end of millennials, but I've seen it a lot with Gen Z, where there's a lot of men who legitimately have convinced themselves with like an ironclad heart that they really do not have anything to give. And so I don't care about relationships for the sake of relationships because not everybody's necessarily called to marriage and not every relationship has to end in marriage so long as it's bringing you both closer to the Lord. But I do see it as a significant stumbling block for people, where they just like hype up marriage almost as if it's like this idol, you know? But I also realize it's just because a lot of people don't have friends in the first place. So you establish good, authentic friendships, you open up people's hearts, things like relationships and stuff come more into view. And honestly, if you don't have a good relationship with God, as you know, your relationships with everybody else are just going to fall flat.
Hmm. And so what was different about your wife? Or at that time, she wasn't your wife?
No, yeah. So honestly, she might not appreciate me saying this, but at the moment, nothing. That I knew I was leading a Bible study in Nashville, which is truthfully, it might be the biggest Bible study in the country, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So I had plenty of, nice young women in town that were interested in dating me, and I don't really know
How
how
many
to
people are
describe.
in this Bible study?
Right now, we're averaging 80. Eight
Wow.
zero. It's not even just a Bible study. It's like a fellowship event. Like everybody comes together. They introduce themselves. They come from parishes all across the diocese. And then we split up into like 8 different small groups. We come back together. It's always the next Sunday's gospel. We do Lectio Divina. And then we finish with Compline, where we pray for our seminarians and then offer our intentions. And then people will literally tailgate in the parking lot after, sometimes to like 10, 11 at night. It's insane. Beautiful, beautiful fruit of the Diocese of Nashville for anybody who's interested in moving here and as a young adult. I would highly plug that Monday night Bible study at Cathedral. But no, with her, I didn't see anything else because I just had the wool over my eyes. I was convincing myself maybe I'm thinking about seminary, but I wasn't seriously taking steps. So that was a cop out. That wasn't true discernment. Ultimately, I think it came down to my friends because I had a very nice conversation with her randomly after adoration Sunday night. And I talked with my friends about it, and they were all like, "You're insane. You need to ask her on a date." And it was just pushing, 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 pushing in a positive way, but still pushing, pushing, pushing. Like, come on, Joseph, you need to do this. Like, it's good for you. And so it wasn't for my own sake, but more, just because everybody else was encouraging me, I did it. Then I ended up going on that first date, and I'm just like, I'm knocked back, and I cannot believe how I was seriously considering not asking her on a date. And then it just everything fell into place. And she's a lot different than me in terms of temperament, but really, I would say there's a beauty there because she grounds me. She doesn't talk as much. She's much more contemplative, and yet at the same time, like here I am able to like encourage her to go out more, right? Be more apostolic. But it's just like a very beautiful, very, very beautiful mix. And we just had our firstborn, Luke, who was born on August 23rd, the feast of St. Rose of Lima. So we're excited.
Congratulations.
He
Praise
just turned
God.
two
That's
months old
awesome.
yesterday. Thank you. Thank you.
What's it like to have a baby for you?
It's beautiful, but to be honest, it feels very natural, right? Which is something I thought wouldn't have happened. I just, you hear everybody hyping up having a baby as if it's this huge leap. And I believe it for most people. And yes, of course, there were some significant changes to my life, but it just seemed like a very natural extension. Even honestly, when it comes to your wedding night as well, right? Everybody hypes up the marital embrace, but I saw the entire thing as just kind of an extension of what we were doing before, which I think was, a really beautiful grace to have that. So it just encouraged me to like dig a little deeper, to sacrifice a little more, be more patient, be more loving, be more selfless, to pray unceasingly, especially because there's a lot of reasons why you need to pray when you've got a baby. So it's been an incredible experience so far, Andrew.
Amazing. And as your job, so you work for, I guess, how many people work for the company you work for, Farm Bureau Insurance?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I mean, this is just the Tennessee wing, and Farm Bureau is all around the country, so it would be thousands, if not tens of thousands.
So working for a big company can be challenging for people who take their Catholic faith seriously, because you might have, you're a political guy, so there might be some political orthodoxies of the moment that are embraced by the company that go contra to Catholic Church teaching, for example. Now, I'm not saying that's the case at Farmers Bureau. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But have you had any experiences like that? And if so, how do you handle them?
So particularly with Farm Bureau, which was I only recently started there over the summer, I haven't quite seen it, but I am realizing just how grateful I am that I had a few years of normal work experience before COVID. Because Farm Bureau, like a lot of bigger and older companies, has tried to do what they can to keep people in the office, even on a hybrid schedule. And yet it's so difficult, particularly if people that are family age, to incentivize them to do it. Even more so because this headquarters is really, really far away from Nashville. So it's closer to the Alabama border than it is to Nashville, at least for me. And that's difficult, I would say, not so much because of anything that they are preaching, but rather because of the witness of those people in that critical early to mid family life, that I would love to have their example, especially as, people to maybe give me advice and to support me, that's not quite there. So if you're a young and aspiring professional who wants to move up, it can become a lot more difficult because you don't build rapport over those natural everyday things like dropping by their cubicle or just grabbing lunch with people. The new evangelization, right, is very incarnational. This idea that we're going to spend time with people and propose Christ that way. And it's very, very difficult when the only time that you spend is both hyper intentional in that, like, we have to like schedule Zoom calls months in advance, or sometimes that's what it feels like. And at the same time, it's incredibly impersonal, where I have to unmute myself to speak with you. There's a bunch of other people that are on this chat. In fact, in our company, nobody's even showing their video. So you don't even get the expressiveness. So it's lacking that real dimension of human interaction, which is hard because you don't feel as filled up. And then if you want to try to propose Christ to other people and be a good witness to others, well, that's really hard to do as well.
Why is that hard in your view? Because of all these things you're mentioning, or is it also just an ethos of the company? It doesn't seem like you're new there. It's weird to talk about Jesus with people at work, whether on Zoom or in person.
Both of those are, good points. I think that because we're in the South, people are naturally a lot more amenable to talking about God than they are in the Northeast. At least that's what I've been told. So believe it or not, that's not really been the issue. In fact, because I worked as a missionary, and that's the reason I was originally brought to Nashville, nobody, it has to come up. I can't tell my story without bringing it up. So God will actually naturally come up. In fact, I found out that my project manager is Eastern Orthodox, who's got a huge devotion to St. Luke, who I love St. Luke. So, I was actually able to have those conversations with him, and he doesn't even live here. He's remote from overseas. So beautiful, beautiful thing there. I think more than anything, it's just because as focused missionaries, we were taught to evangelize so personally, intentionally, spending so much time together. And that's just much more difficult in the workforce. And it's the same thing even in the parish life as well. So
Yeah, I've been speaking to a lot of people from Nashville because I search for Catholics on LinkedIn. That's how I find people. And I do it by geography just because it's like Catholic in Nashville, right? Like it's just a search.
and I saw you were friends with a lot of them, or a lot of my friends, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and so well, I have a lot of like connections on LinkedIn. I have like 12,000. But there's a lot. I've been speaking to a lot of people from Nashville, and I spoke to a gentleman who's in deliverance ministry there. He owns and has a coaching business called Whole Catholic. Very interesting guy. And they're saying, everybody's telling me that the Catholic community in Nashville is super strong. Like it's not very big percentage of the population because it's much more Protestant area, but that the Catholic community is like really, really, really strong in Nashville.
Oh
Is that
yeah,
your
you hit
experience?
the nail on the head. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. First of all, it's a much younger town proportionally, right? Than I'm from Florida. I mean,
Yeah, you look
like
old.
everybody's old in Florida. So you come to a place like Nashville, you have a lot of young people, and we've seen what's happened in terms of like young people re-engaging their faith in Catholic circles. So that's certainly a positive. Plus, they bring a lot of energy to the parish. You add on to the fact that, yeah, it's only about 3% Catholic, depending on, I think it was like as of the 2020 census. But the world that we live in is so culturally Christian that you can be more open about it generally. They're much less antagonistic, maybe, as probably would have been in the South in years past, and much more just open to hearing about Catholicism in general. And because we have such good historic parishes and some really, really good priests, it's just, I mean, we all click together. It feels like a small town, and there's 700,000 people here. And I was actually able to count. I could, not that I would recommend this, you could mortally sin and be forgiven at 5 different points over the course of any weekday in Nashville, Tennessee. I have a friend of mine who was doing ministry work in California, and in his particular area, they had confession once a week, 1 hour, and it was rotating parishes. Here, I mean, yeah, the cathedral offers 2 hours of confession every single day at different times, bookending at noon and at 4:30, and yeah, I mean, it's just all over the place, really, from 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. I think. Yeah, there's confession times, and you see it. Like you just see it in the way that people approach the faith. A lot of people who might not care as much about the faith is here. Oh, there's a good community. Come in and they just catch fire. In fact, even the Bible study we have now, I don't think a single of the 8 leaders of that Bible study have ever led a Bible study before that moment. So it's not just a fun place where people can go find their spouse. It is literally calling people to a greater relationship with Christ and to do stuff about it too. I mean, I've been able to fill mission trips just from Nashville young adults alone, which is awesome.
And do you see yourself staying in Nashville? Do you think it's a place you want to raise your child? Or do you think like, hey, I'm here because this job is here. I don't know that I see myself here long term.
Yeah, I mean, I would do everything I could to stay in Nashville. Of course, I have to be open and discerning of the will of the Lord. I was trying to go to med school for quite some time after I left working as a missionary. In fact, I never thought I was going to stay working as a data analyst. It was just a lifeboat that now is my full-time occupation. So it's really not the job that's keeping me in town. It is 100% and exclusively the people. The sacramental availability and the formation of the priests and all of that is wonderful, but there's plenty of places in the country where there are still good priests and good parishes. It's really just the people. And if I left, it would likely be to the Dallas-Fort Worth area where my wife's entire family is located, so I have to be open to that as well. But for right now, yeah, it's really just the economics of trying to find a house. As you might
Sure,
have heard, Nashville is
sure.
just insane.
Yeah, well, I'm a guitar player, so to me, Nashville is like a mecca. So there's such amazing musicians down there. So every time I go to Nashville, I'm just put to shame. It's just like amazing. Like everywhere you go to some local like coffee shop and there's some guy playing in there that you're just like, oh my God, like this is
Well, and
incredible.
just yeah, and just off like I mean, it's so easy to just pull in live musicians for anything. Like we were hosting a ball for the Feast of St. Luke. This was 3 years ago, in the where we do wedding receptions at Cathedral, just for the young adults, and we wanted to have live music to fit the event. And we were trying to play from like that old big band era, right? Because that works with both waltz timing and swing timing. And we were trying to have both forms of dance there. Anyway, like I just asked a friend of mine that sings in the choir at St. Mary's downtown, and he was able to pull all his friends from the conservatory down there. I mean, and you're looking at, people who've performed at Carnegie Hall. Like I think one of the guitarists played with Miles Davis, and I'm like, how can we just find people like this?
Yeah, it's a mecca.
It's remarkable. It
Yeah.
is absolutely remarkable. I don't appreciate it anywhere near as much as I'm sure somebody like you would, who's much more musically inclined.
Yeah, it's really you have to play to understand how hard it is to do what these guys are doing down there. Like just and it's just so it's incredible. So you've been so generous with your time, Joseph. I wanted to maybe like as a way of coming to close, if somebody is questioning how it is that they can be fully Catholic, working for a big company, and they might be struggling with it. They might be struggling with sort of how much, what they can do, what steps they can take to sort of integrate that as best as possible. Do you have any advice for them in your experience?
Yeah, I have plenty. The first thing is not even Catholic advice. It comes from Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
right? And he speaks about, at least from his observation, that newer generations, and remains to be seen if it's because they're young or their outlook on life, they're putting more and more weight on their job as a means of fulfillment in and of itself. And he speculates that that's because we've lost, our religious community and our social community and our family community. So we put a lot more on our job to fulfill us. And I've caught myself doing that quite a bit. As I mentioned before, I was working in politics. I mean, I worked for Mitt Romney's campaign in Boston in 2012. Like that was an insanely cool experience. I was working, as a missionary for 2 years after. Then I was working on a national research program that, when coronavirus hit, became like the data analytics I was doing for them were being sent to Congress to report on the state of the virus. Like I was right in the heart of that. Those are some extraordinarily cool things. And now I'm working for an insurance company doing basic reporting and accounting. I don't have a particular interest in any of those things. And it would be very, very easy in a case like this, especially knowing that you might be here for the next 30, 40 years, to fall into despair and say, there's no way that I'm going to be able to live out my faith because the other people here are not in a position to fill me up, right? And I just don't get anything to be able to share with them. So I take more the approach of look for the boring job, the one that like help, is a means to an end. That end, of course, your relationship with God. If it provides for your family, God bless it. I heard some great advice saying that you should, this is a, rhetorical statement, but you should go into your office every day and kneel down before your desk and kiss it, because that's the altar by which you're going to be offering sacrifice to God that day. And if we're looking to sanctify the temporal order, I would say any little bit helps. Certainly the money that you make from that is very good, but really any kind of witness that you can give. It might be the occasional conversation where the Lord comes up, but I would say really anything that you can do to like just tip the needle. I mean, we talk about the offenses in the culture that we live in now against the dignity of the human being. Anything that you can do to cut against that grain and to once again show people this additional respect and honor that they might not have seen in other people is respecting Christ in that other person. And as far as what you need to do to fill yourself up, I would say community has got to be the most important thing. It's harder in some areas than others, but I mean, you have to do it. So I lean into the mission trips that I do on the side. That is a big source of support for me. Of course, staying close to the sacraments, daily mass, weekly confession. Those things I think do quite a bit to keep me grounded, so that I'm not thinking about job in a disordered way. It's just simply a means of bringing me closer to God
Yeah.
through other ways, and not an end in of itself.
Reminds me, sounds very like Opus Dei kind of
Well, you
attitude.
would know.
Yeah. So it's but there was this, I remember I was reading this book about how monasteries have created a bunch of successful businesses, and how that's kind of strange because they're not, you don't think of monks as like business people per se, but they do really well. It's also similar around here. There's a lot of Amish people they don't like have educations beyond usually eighth or ninth grade, and they don't use a lot of technology, and yet their businesses succeed at a much higher rate. And there's like a lot of research about this. Mostly it's about their work ethic and their honesty and their community, sort of their sort of networking. But with the monks, I remember there was this one, they're interviewing this monastery, this abbot at a monastery in Belgium, I forget which one, and they made this famous beer that everybody would come, and they were like, whenever they created the next batch of beers, like lines to try to buy this beer that these monks were creating. And the guy was interviewing the abbot, and the abbot stops the interview and he says, I just want to let you know that we don't live to brew beer. Like, we brew beer to live. And, so it was sort of like, yeah, this is what we do, but our life is about God and about prayer. And this is one aspect of that. Great, but the bigger picture is God and community. And I thought that was a really good line. It's sort of like, whatever you're doing, it's really, there's a bigger game being played.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I even saw something similar to that. I believe it was in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed years ago from the creator of Dilbert. And I don't know if this was like, I think this was during graduation time, and he was great. He was cutting against that narrative that you would hear, like even in Steve Jobs' speech about find something that you're passionate about that you can like just lose yourself in. And his advice was much more practical, saying that that's a wonderful thing if you can do it, but a hyper small portion of the population is realistically going to do that. And historically, that would have never been an option. It would have just simply been what is available in your local area. And so his recommendation is just find something that you are naturally good at. He's like, I was good at doodling and making comics and stuff, so I did it. It's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but if it's something that I'm really good at, well, then it doesn't take as much time. Of course, you can make the most gains from that and then use the fruit of which to, to bless every other area of your life. So yeah, I have to still remind myself of that on a very routine basis.
Yeah, well, yeah, amazing. Well, thank you, Joseph, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. It was really inspiring to me, and I'm sure anybody listening will also be inspired by your faith and your dedication, and that you lived like you really went the narrow path. I mean, most people, or myself included, unfortunately, before my conversion, was living very much, sort of like the life of the world. And as it relates especially to relationships with the opposite sex. And so you really, you lived your faith out, and I think that that's the testament to God's working in your life and your own character. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And we covered so many things. You've been obviously a great host, and I appreciate everything that you're doing ministry wise.
Yeah, well, I came to the faith through Bishop Barron's work in a podcast. So, so I'm trying to sort of like pay that forward, I guess, because a lot of people, as you know, aren't coming to church, but they are on YouTube, or they are on Spotify, or they are on whatever platform online. So if we can take some inspiration in the gospel, the truth of the good news of Christ's sacrifice for us, and our home in His church, then let's do it. So,
Beautiful.
To that end, would you mind closing us out in any prayer that you are inspired to pray?
Yeah, absolutely. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, I want to thank you for this time that you've given us today to go out and to glorify you and to share you with others. Lord, I want to thank you so much for Andrew and his ministry and everything that he's done, and really for this conversation that we've had today, that we can, in speaking about the comings and goings of everyday life, really see how you've come to work through others and to learn a little bit more about you so that we might also grow closer. Lord, for everybody who's listening to this, we ask for blessings for them. For everybody who will be affected by this, we ask for blessings. And then, of course, for those who are far out, seemingly of our reach, that we may never weary of your mercy, and that we might always remember that there's always a space for them in the kingdom. Please inflame our hearts and give us the strength that we need to continue to move forward. We ask this through Christ our Lord, and with the intercession of St. Luke the Evangelist. Amen.
And the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you so much, Joseph. It was really wonderful to meet you and to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.